Today, I want to talk about the post-divorce situationship. So, after doing this work for almost a decade, I have witnessed countless times the pattern of somebody who's been in a marriage for over a decade, sometimes 20 plus years, and then either during the separation process or shortly after her divorce finds herself in yet again another emotionally unfulfilling, draining relationship. If it's even a relationship, it might be a friends with benefit situation, something that with somebody who can't commit. And I want to talk about the primary reason this happens and then make a few points and talk about the journey of what happens. Unfortunately, what I've seen happen after working with dozens and dozens of people in this scenario and speaking with more than 3,000 people who've had similar paths. I want to talk about the long-term implications, if you will, of what can happen if we don't correct this pattern. So, why does this happen to begin with? So, obviously, maybe you've been in this situation, maybe you're in this situation now, and a part of you is knowing, I need to stop doing this. I know this isn't healthy, but I don't know how to do any better. The root cause behind why you may have found yourself in another unfulfilling relationship after a divorce comes down to abandonment issues. Now, this might not be conscious and it might not be obvious to you. A lot of people who find themselves, especially on the tail end, maybe the marriage was great in the beginning, or maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was, it deteriorated over the last several years and, got worse and worse and worse. A lot of people in that downfall um, are hungry for connection. They are hungry for somebody to pay attention to them. They are hungry for, I just want to be loved. I want to feel like somebody understands me. And usually during that really tough transition point in their lives, they are more vulnerable to an emotional abuser or another unhealthy relationship. And the reason being is because of their own abandonment issues. And obviously, when we aren't getting our needs met in a romantic relationship, and especially for somebody, if we're with somebody who we promise the rest of our lives with, um, that not getting our needs met definitely feels like we're being abandoned in that moment. But here's where the kick is. When we get into unfulfilling relationships, it's never truly about how somebody else is abandoning us. It is about how we are abandoning ourselves to maintain a connection with somebody that probably isn't right for us. And this pattern of self-abandonment goes way back to childhood conditioning stuff or prior relationship experiences. So, the root cause reason why you may have found yourself in a post divorce situationship is because of abandonment issues, but even deeper than that, your own self abandonment issues. This leads me to the second point is that a lot of people who have spent many years with somebody, even if that somebody wasn't what they truly wanted, it was still somebody. And here's the way in which self abandonment comes up: we settle, we give up what we truly want, we make excuses for somebody's behavior, we justify and say things like, nobody's perfect. Every relationship or marriage has their problems. We ignore the truth that we know inside of our hearts and in our gut in order to preserve that connection. And at the root of that behavior is self abandonment. Self-abandonment gets trained in us when we perhaps grew up in a childhood where we were the parent. If you had to um, take care, emotionally caretake, or grow up fast in your childhood, this can be a root reason why you self-abandon. If you felt like you had to compete for attention in your childhood. Maybe you had a sibling that was smarter than you. Maybe you had a parent who had mental health issues or who was sick in some way. And all of the energy in the household went towards that person. You might have felt like you needed to compete in order to get attention. This can also lead to self-abandonment patterns. So not wanting to be alone after we've spent years with somebody or decades with somebody is a common secondary reason why people get into unhealthy relationships after their divorce. The primary root cause that I want to keep circling back to is self-abandonment. Self-abandonment. And it's easy to think that, and it is, there's some truth to this, very much so, that the people that we choose are leaving us in some way. Maybe they cheat. Maybe they have a gaming addiction or a porn addiction, or maybe they need to have several beers after work every single night. Or maybe they have so many inner issues they've never worked on that they can't be fully attuned or emotionally available to us in the way that we would like. These are all forms of people leaving. And when you have self-abandonment, you are more prone to doing whatever you can to stop somebody from leaving you. And that means leaving yourself in that process or losing yourself in that process. So not wanting to be alone is a secondary reason. But the issue of not wanting to be alone is really, I don't know how to be alone and comfortable and accepting and happy with myself. Finally, the third reason that I find that women jump from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak, after a divorce is they're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of what other people are going to think of them. They usually build their identity on being a married woman. Even if that marriage is draining her, they learn to numb the pain of it draining their energy. And they may choose to focus on work, being overly involved with their kids, being overly involved in friends, chaos, or complications or challenges. And these are all kind of sneaky hiding places to avoid facing herself. So when the marriage or relationship finally does end, there can be a fear of what other people are going to think of her. In fact, fear of what other people are going to think of her is often a reason why she walked down the aisle to begin with, even though knowing in her gut it was the wrong thing to do. So all of this goes back to the ways that we abandon ourselves or avoid the truth that lives within us. And what I often see happen, sadly, is that women who exit a toxic marriage, or maybe it wasn't toxic entirely, but it certainly wasn't unhealthy and she learned to live with it, but she wasn't truly happy. And then these women leave. They have wonderful careers on paper, but often their self-abandonment patterns are showing up in their careers. They are overextending themselves. They are not setting boundaries. They may be not asking for what they're worth in terms of their salary. They may be accepting breadcrumbs in their career to a certain extent. So over time, when we get out of a narcissistic relationship and then we find ourselves in more unfulfilling dating relationships, it turns into this chip on somebody's shoulder. They're not truly happy with themselves in their lives. Things are okay. They're certainly not crying on the floor every night like they were at the beginning of their divorce, but they're not good either. They're just treading water, or they're just kind of getting through the day and one day bleeds into the next and they feel stuck. Even though on paper things look really good, they don't feel like happy. And they often reminisce about the younger version of themselves that they used to be, who had a lot of energy, who had a lot of stars in her eyes and hope about the future and took risks, to chase dreams. And it's like by the time she gets through so many heartbreaks and disappointment with herself, all stemming from self-abandonment issues. And most of the time, self-abandonment comes from some variation of trauma. They feel like they stop believing that things are possible for them. They stop believing that a healthy relationship is possible. And unfortunately, a lot of women who reach this point do a few things. They continue to be a workaholic until the stress starts affecting her physical health. She might have IBS. She might have reproductive issues. She might have perimenopause or menopausal issues that are very extreme or severe that interfere with her daily life. She might feel like she's isolating in her life. She used to be, in her 20s and 30s, really sociable, really outgoing. Now she feels like she doesn't really trust people very much. She turns to work to numb the pain. She might turn to shopping to numb the pain. She might turn to a few glasses of wine every night to numb the pain. And again, the self-abandonment is the root cause of all of this. The avoidance of being with ourselves. And some people will say, I am protecting my peace. I am being alone. I'm just going to choose to be single. But what they're really saying is, I don't trust myself enough to choose differently. I don't know how to be fully with myself and happy in that journey. A lot of women that I work with have been single for a while, but they're not happy with themselves. They're extremely critical. They don't feel good in their own skin. They don't feel attractive. They don't feel confident. They feel like they're all washed up in a certain sense. And so I want you to remember as you're listening to this that the primary cause of a post-divorce situationship specifically, but on a more global scale, the reason that you continue to feel stuck in your life, despite doing all the therapy or EMDR, which are great, or reading a lot, or podcasts like this, or going on retreats, or working in your career a little harder, or getting the next promotion. Like the reason that you feel not unhappy is because of this self-abandonment issue. And it's insidious. If you've made it to 40 or 50 or over that, and you have been doing this to a certain extent your whole life, it shows up in every area of your life. Now, it's not impossible to break. It's very possible to break, but that process requires someone who is committed to transforming the relationship they have with themselves and not going back in time to the version she was before her marriage, but using who she is now and the experience and the fires she's walked through and the battle scars she has as hard-won, well-earned experience for becoming the best version of herself. And how from that place of being the best version of herself, not just checking the boxes off of the list, but truly feeling amazing in her own skin, this is the place where your outcomes in dating and relationships start to shift, where you start to pull in a different caliber of person, where you start to trust yourself to make the right decision, where you stop overanalyzing every little behavior or text in the early phases of dating, where you stop getting a disappointment and then writing the whole right, completely giving up entirely, right? You need tolerance to rejection and tolerance and increased capacity to disappointment without making the meaning that something's wrong with you. So if you're ready to take the next step, if you found this insightful, you can visit my free masterclass, Becoming the One. Go to bethanydotson.com/masterclass. And that will walk you through the 5 shifts you need to master in your own personal psychology and in your actions to shift your stuckness after your divorce, to shift out of a post-divorce situationship, to stop attracting emotionally unavailable men, even though you've done all the right things. And then if you're ready to take an even bigger step, you can book a free discovery session and see if we are a good fit to help you overcome these patterns that have plagued your love life and probably your emotional health for a long time. And this call is for people who've done other things like therapy. They've gotten benefit. Maybe they've done EMDR, maybe they've done, other coaching, career coaching, maybe even other relationship coaching, but they still feel like they're not where they want to be. And they know deep down that they're a catch. They know that they have a lot of love untapped within them to offer themselves first and foremost. But then they truly deep down want to share their life with somebody and amplify that love with somebody else who is capable of reciprocating and receiving that. So bethanydotson.com/talk if you'd like to have an initial conversation about how we might be able to help you achieve that in your life. And I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode. Take care.